Welcome to Imprint, a podcast about creating a home and life you love. I'm Natalie Walton, an interior designer, stylist, and best-selling author focused on an holistic approach to homes. Each week, I'm sharing insights and interviews about the creative process to help you enhance both your interiors and well-being, as well as provide you with the tools and resources to make considered and sustainable choices with all that you create. Hello everyone, welcome to Imprint. I'm very happy to have you here today. We are going to continue on with our design series. Last week we looked at floor plans and spatial design. So if that is something that is on your mind and you're trying to get right, then go listen to that episode. But first, you might want to get some notes on color. Color is one of those things that so many people struggle with. If you are going backwards and forwards to the paint store, if you've done about 10 different sample pots and you're like struggling and really don't know what to do, or maybe you're curious to experiment with color. Color is kind of making a big comeback at the moment, and you sort of think, I want to have a bit of a little bit of fun with color and I want to test out some ideas, then we're going to get into it and how you can do it and how you can get the colors right, the tones right, and really feel more confident creating with color and using color in your own home and designs. So I am really looking forward to sharing this episode with you. You might think, Natalie, doing something about color, isn't she all about neutrals? And look, yes, I use neutrals a lot in my interiors, but I've also used a lot of color over the years. I used to work in a paint store I worked in a paint store for about 5 years. I was always consulting with people about color. I have had many homes where I've used color over the years and done different kind of things. So, and definitely all in my photo shoots for magazines, I would always be choosing different colors and different color schemes, like doing kids' bedrooms in greens and all different types of colors. So, I would always go through a phase of like, if it didn't move, or even if it didn't move, I would paint it. So yeah, I've just got to get that right. And then I used to have like a yellow and white striped wall in my bedroom, when feature walls were in, like going way back. And so I've done all sorts of different things with color. A Tiffany blue wall in another room. So yeah, definitely done all the different things, showing my age in terms of the era of feature walls. So maybe we'll get into that as well. All right, so let's get into it. I'm going to share with you some of the most common mistakes in relation to color and what you need to consider to get it right. So I hope that you're going to find this valuable. Number one relates to ignoring natural light. It's really important that we don't overlook how natural light affects how we perceive color throughout the day and in different spaces. So when it comes to choosing color, it is so important that you consider the aspect of your home. You will have heard me speak about this before, but obviously, as much as possible, we want to be orientating our main living areas to where we're getting the most natural light. So that is, if you are in the Northern Hemisphere, you really want to be orientating your living areas towards that southern light, and in the Southern Hemisphere towards north. Generally, like northeasterly aspect is really good if you can get that. So we really want to consider what is happening with the light in any room. And of course, not every room is going to have that aspect. You're going to have some bedrooms that are west facing, some that are maybe east facing, and it really depends on how your home is orientated around the block. So when it comes to choosing light, you really need to know and understand what is the aspect of that room, because it can very well be that you're going to have, you most likely will have different aspects in different rooms. And so you want to consider that. Now, does that mean that you should go and paint every room a slightly different shade? To be honest, I wouldn't recommend that. If you really wanted to and you felt like it was a huge issue, you could, but I would try and find a happy medium ground, because it's just going to cost you a lot more. There's going to be more paint wastage, because obviously if you're painting an entire home, let's just say you're painting it some kind of off-white or white color, if you're chopping and changing every single different room, then it's just going to you're going to have a lot of paint wastage. Like it's not going to be exact for every single room, and that's going to bump up your costs as well. So what I would suggest instead is to choose a happy middle ground. So generally speaking, if you've got low light, I would go for warmer tones. So kind of creamier tones with your whites. And also something to consider though is if you do have some very dark rooms, you can go quite dark in those spaces. And that would kind of be the exception where I'd say, okay, maybe experiment and have a bit more fun in those rooms and make them feel a little bit more cocoon-like within the spaces. But it's really important to test the colors in different rooms and different parts of the room too. And notice them at different times of day, because you will see the light will look very different, first thing in the morning versus sort of late afternoon sun, whatever is happening. And you also need to consider your colors in relation to the flooring that you've got. If you are choosing your flooring, you want to kind of create a color tonal palette, and we'll get into that more shortly. All right, the second mistake that I see people make a lot when it comes to color relates to getting the wrong undertones. So this is all about choosing colors with clashing undertones. So basically mixing warm and cool tones. Instead, what you really want to do is you want to stick to one tone and move up and down the spectrum on that tone. For most of us, we're probably going to be embracing warmer tones within our spaces to kind of make them feel warm and inviting. So go with that and avoid mixing the tones of your colors. So consider this in relation to the color of your floorboards, if you've got floorboards, and other key pieces within your spaces as well. Maybe the bench tops that you're having in a kitchen. Really focus on those bigger items that are going to have a bigger impact in terms of your overall color palette. Number 3 relates to using too many colors, especially if you're using bold colors. So really try and avoid lots of different bold colors, because this can ultimately create sort of like visual chaos within your spaces. So I'd really recommend that you restrain your palette to 2 to 3 colors and then repeat those as a visual thread throughout your spaces, or go up and down on a particular color palette. So let's just say like you really like a mushroom kind of tone, then go up and down with different elements along that spectrum so that everything will work really cohesively together. And that's when you can avoid things clashing. Number 4, what I see all too often is people are trying to make decisions on paint colors and other colors from really small swatches. So really avoid that. Instead, when it comes to testing paint colors, you really want to do them on larger sections so that you can really get a better sense of how they're going to look in the space. Also really important is if you're painting onto the wall, make sure that you do 2 coats, because you will do 2 coats for your finished look, and that will really give you a good indication of what that color is going to look like in reality. If you're just doing 1 coat, it's not going to give you a true reflection of the color. So that's really important as well. And try and paint like a 1 meter by 1 meter or like 50 centimeters by 50 centimeters. Another thing that I do is I have these large A3 pieces of paper, and they're kind of like pieces of cardboard, and I've painted those in some of the most, popular colors like that I use a lot in different rooms. And so you can move those easily around as well. So if for some reason you can't, like you go to site and you can't paint the walls, or, maybe they're just, they're like halfway through putting the walls up or whatever is happening, then you can move those things around. I actually did this with the floor paint color at the Imprint House showroom, because it was just really tricky to get at that stage any kind of painter. And so, I wasn't able to get someone to come out and paint like a sample test. So I basically did it on these big sheets of cardboard, and then I moved them up against the wall to see how the colors look in relation to each other. And it was just a really simple solution to do that. So that's kind of a little tip for you as well. Number 5 is forgetting finishes. So really, this is about ignoring the impact of different paint finishes such as matte, satin, gloss, and how these impact the appearance of different colors. So just in general, it's just important to know that gloss reflects light, whereas matte colors or matte finishes absorb light. So generally, I prefer a matte finish. If you have gloss, like I said, it can reflect light, but it can also be much busier as a finish. I like the kind of the calmness of a matte finish. So keep that in mind, and different colors can look quite different in relation to if you're, like the finish that you're using. And just on that as well, colors will look very different indoors versus outdoors. So you can use the same color inside versus outside, and it can look incredibly different because obviously outside there's so much more natural light reflecting on it. So generally it will look lighter outside and something will look darker inside. So that's just something to keep in mind if you're using any colors both inside and outside, and whether you want them to look the same or if you're fine with them looking different, but just being aware of that. Number 6 relates to ignoring adjacent spaces. So not considering how colors flow and connect between adjoining rooms, and also just adjoining finishes as well. As I mentioned just a moment ago, when I was looking at the floor paint color for the showroom, I was really looking at it in relation to the fluted travertine tiles that were on the showroom counter, and also the lime plaster paint that was on the wall, like one of the big feature walls. So you want to see how those colors look in relation to flooring. You want to see how they look in relation to adjoining rooms, especially if you're using color. So what is the sort of the look from one room to another? In one of my homes, I had sort of quite a deep gray in one of the living rooms. It was more formal space. It had very high ceilings. It was a terrace style home. And then that looked onto the hallway. And so in the hallway, I actually had a very deep black. Like it wasn't like a black, it was just off black. And it was similar to the domino color. Some of you will be familiar with the Dulux domino color. It was similar to that. And it was coming off the living room. And I actually really liked that you would be sitting in the living room and you could see into the hallway, into the adjoining space. And that was dark. And it was like, oh, it kind of gave you that sense of like, oh, what's beyond here? Like that it just creates some curiosity, and it's just like a nice little effect that you can create from one space to another. And I will also just say with that as well, also consider when it comes to adjacent spaces, your outdoor spaces. So this is one of the reasons why for my homes in the Byron area, I have gone so neutral, because on both of these spaces, we are surrounded by trees. We're surrounded by pasture land. And so there's a lot of green outside, which really reflects inside, and it's busy. Like I look out, at the moment I'm looking out and I'm seeing the mango tree, and it's like got these really sculptural branches, which are really beautiful, and lots of greenery. And whichever way I look, like it's just a mass of green, but like different, size leaves and shapes and sizes. And, some things are tall, skinny trees, and other things are, plants, and, so it's really busy. And so I wanted to counteract that with having a really calm interior and having the simplicity of one color on the inside. So the same color on the walls as on the ceiling, as on the trims. So that was really intentional on my part. So you want to consider your adjacent spaces, which are sometimes also your outside spaces. Obviously, if you're living in the city, it's going to be a really different consideration, because you might be, and this is what was my case when we were living in the city, from our kitchen, we looked out onto a brick wall. It was actually the kind of neighbor's adjoining wall. So, in that case, it's like you can kind of sometimes experiment a little bit more, because you're not necessarily looking out onto a busy outscape, as it were. So really just considering those outdoor spaces and how they reflect in the inside as well. For us, the green reflects a lot of green light inside as well. And so we're kind of counteracting that as well with the colors that we've chosen. Number 7 is about overlooking furniture. So not, coordinating wall colors with existing furniture and fixtures. And so this is why it's so important. And I'm amazed at how many people overlook this step. about not creating a design concept for your home and really factoring in like the key colors and palettes and materials and really looking at them together to get an overall look and feel for how you want your spaces to do, and then to do it room by room as well. So you really want to consider these elements. If you're working with existing furniture, you want to consider those factors in relation to the other colors that you choose within your home. Number 8 relates to, trends. Trends are a fact of life in the interior design world. And, many of you will have seen that so many colors are making a huge comeback. We had greens for a number of years, and green is still strong, and oxblood, and, there are many colors that are really kind of being used more and more within interiors. I'm seeing a lot more of people using color on tiles and creating like a checkerboard pattern with different tones of colors. So you're not going necessarily, red and white, but it might be, red and a sort of like a warm cream with the red, and sort of like creating a checkerboard pattern with that, with tile and other colors. So color is being used a lot more. And so it's really important when we use color to really consider, first of all, consider where we're using the color. So in general, I would really recommend against using anything that's trend-based in relation to tiles. Tiles are expensive. Tiles are expensive to replace if you get bored with them. Also, tiles date very quickly. Remember when everyone was doing like the Moroccan tiles everywhere, the patterned Moroccan tiles on floorboards, well, not floorboards, but floors. And now you really don't see that so much. And those homes that have gone all out and put so much, of that Moroccan tile look on their flooring, it just looks really dated now. So I would really avoid doing that in, your home in relation to those fixtures that are expensive to change. Look, if you want to experiment with paint's an actual really inexpensive way to sort of experiment and have fun. And, you can do that with paint and use paint to, have stripes. Like I said, I did that in my bedroom way back when, or, to even create a checkerboard pattern. We did that with one of our showrooms for Imprint House when we were at Newry Bar Merchants. And we actually painted on a sort of like these really large scale diamonds on the floor. And that was actually, it wasn't black and white, but it was like a darker gray and a lighter gray. And it's interesting to see that the new owners of that space, they have kept that. And I've actually seen other people paint that in other areas. There's another building across the road, and they'd basically, taken that idea and used that in that space. So you can use paint in all sorts of ways, and it's so much more inexpensive to change than to do it, if you are if you're doing it with fixtures or fittings. So that would be my really big thing that I would say to you. And really just also with anything that is a trend. For me, I'm really looking at long-term solutions, because it's a long-term solution, a timeless solution is really the most sustainable solution. So if sustainability is important, if being a good custodian of this planet is important to you, then I would really encourage you to make the timeless choice when it comes to your interiors, because that is going to be what's best for the planet as well. Okay, so that is a little bit of rant about trends. So number 9 is really about not designing for your home. It is so important when we are using colors and when we are considering any design element in our home that we really consider it in relation to the home that we have, the period of the home, the architectural style of the home, all of these different things. And just be careful of, not being influenced by Instagram or what your friends are doing. Really design for your particular place. Now, this is not to say that, you can't experiment and that you have to sort of, be really strict and like you've got a period home that you can only do it a particular way. You can experiment and you can be playful and you can have fun. But at the same time, you really need to design for your space, the type of light that you get in your home, what you enjoy living in, what feels good for you in your home. So really design that in consideration. And it's really important. It's easy to get swept up in what everyone else is doing, but really come back to what feels good for you and what you're going to love in the long term. And number 10 is also really overlooking creating a color mood board. This is particularly important if you don't feel confident with color. So really bring the different colors together in, a color palette that you can, play around with. You might be doing this with your material palette or your concept board, but really playing around with how the different tones look together, how the different colors. Do you have too many? Maybe you don't have enough. Maybe you need to add some more warmth into your color palette, and really looking at the way that the different key materials are going to look together, the paint colors, the hardware finishes, and really look at how those different elements look together. So let's just quickly recap on some of the ideas that we've talked about in relation to color and some things to avoid and what you should really consider. So we really looked at this idea of don't ignore natural light and really understand how it impacts your home at different times of the day and different areas of your home. We looked at the importance of really knowing and understanding the undertones of colors, and to really be conscious of, are you going to work within a warm color palette or a cool palette, and really just stick to one and move up and down that spectrum. We looked at making sure that we're not going to use too many different colors in one space, and really restraining our color palette, either sticking to sort of 2 to 3 key different colors, or otherwise, again, going up and down that tonal palette. We looked at this idea of making sure when it comes to swatches that we're not making decisions on tiny little, business card size swatches, but instead that we're testing those paint colors. We're doing 2 coats. We're looking at them in a range of different areas. We're checking them at different times of the day as well. And I shared the tip as well of how you can paint it on a large piece of card, like an A3 size piece of card as well. I'm not sure what you call that in America if you're in America. I know you've got, because you call it letter size for some things. Sorry, I'm not sure. Maybe broadsheet. It's kind of like a broadsheet newspaper. Like the size of the New York Times. I don't know if it's still broadsheet, but if you opened it up, that kind of size. So we also looked at the importance of knowing and understanding the impact that finishes have on the look of any given color. So this relates to whether you're choosing a matte, a satin, or a gloss, and really understanding that gloss reflects light and matte absorbs light, and also knowing and understanding that you can use the same color outside and it will look lighter than if you're using that same color inside, because obviously outside there's so much more light reflecting on that. We looked at the importance of, really considering adjacent spaces when we're choosing colors. And this can be both different rooms and the rooms that lead off a particular room, but also we can consider, the outdoor spaces and the impact that those colors have on our interiors. Actually, just kind of reminds me of that brick wall I was talking about in relation to the inner city terrace that I was living in Sydney. The neighbor's wall was actually salmon pink of all colors. And it really reflected into our kitchen. And I really didn't like it. But yeah, I mean, obviously, if we were going to stay there long term, we were going to paint that wall. And, it was just, you really got to sort of know and understand the impact of those colors from the outside that they can have on your interiors as well. Okay. We also looked at this idea of really, choosing our color palette in relation to what we've got existing, considering the furniture and the tones of our furniture and the key elements within our spaces. Flooring as well is a huge one. So, if we're using floorboards, what are the colors and the tones of that, and how does that work back to the colors that you're using? Especially if you're going to go and use colors, like if you're sort of curious to try different shades of green, for instance, or different reds or browns, you really want to consider that in relation to the color of your floorboards. It's so important. Number 8 relates to trends and color trends, and how we just need to be really careful that, when it comes to choosing color in relation to trends, that we're doing it for the right reasons. And, we can be excited about experimenting with colors, but we can add those through accessories But just be really careful, especially using color with fixtures that are very expensive to change. It can really date your home. So I would just keep any color experiments to either accessories or paint, which is much easier to change. And really, my encouragement for you would be to really go for the sustainable option, which is the timeless option. Number 9 is not designing for your home. It's really important that we always factor in the architectural style of our home, where we live in the world, how we live, and what feels good to us. We all have different sensitivities in terms of how we want to feel in our homes. So we really want to consider that as well. And so, design for your home and what meets your needs. And number 10 was to really, make sure that if we're lacking confidence when it comes to color, to really work with a color mood board and, see how different colors work together before we start outlaying expenses of, going crazy and buying lots of different things and then realizing, the wall doesn't look right with the floorboards, or, the tapware, like it's a completely different color tone and it's just not feeling cohesive. So ultimately, that's what we want to create in our spaces. Just to remind you that I've got a guide that is based on my best-selling book, This Is Home, and it is the 10 foundations to create your dream home. So if this is something that, is on your heart and mind and you're really wanting to get your home right, I really would recommend going and grabbing that. It's a great resource for you. So you can get that at nataliewalton.com/workbook. I hope that this episode has been helpful for you in relation to color, and I would love to hear from you as always. So you can let me know over on Instagram at Natalie Walton, or what you're struggling with most in relation to color, and I'd love to help you. And like I said, if you know anyone who's been to the paint store 20 times and they've got 100 different swatches on their walls, then maybe you want to share this episode with them as well. I've also actually got on my website, I've got a notebook post about color as well. And sometimes I know that it can be easier to see a visual example of that. So if you go to nataliewalton.com/notebook, you can see it there. And I'll link this in the show notes as well. The post is called Goodbye Mike, How to Infuse Warm Color Tones in Your Interiors. And I share in that post I share the colors that I've used in my latest space for Imprint House, like the exact color names, because I'm always being asked. So in that, I look at the importance of choosing the right shades, look at, the importance of lighting, color drenching, this idea of color drenching and drenching your spaces in color, and some other elements as well. So you might want to go and check that out, and I'll add that to the show notes as well. Thank you so much for joining me today. Really grateful. If you've enjoyed this episode and you haven't yet left a review, then I would greatly appreciate that. If you're a new listener, then make sure that you hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss an episode, because next week we have got the final part of this series coming up, and I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. And that is really about how to design with sustainability in mind. This is such an important topic, and I'm really looking forward to sharing that one with you. So I will see you then. Have a beautiful week. All of the links and info for this episode are at nataliewalton.com/podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so that you can get a direct download of the latest episode. And I really appreciate when you take a minute to rate and review, as well as share the love with someone you know who might benefit from this episode, or on social media. If you'd like to access a range of free resources, come visit my website, nataliewalton.com. Thank you to Jaeger Media for producing this podcast. And I would also like to acknowledge the people of the Bundjalung Nation where it was recorded, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I look forward to connecting again soon. I'm Natalie Walton, and you've been listening to Imprint.